A symbol of excellence, of national pride, of what the human body is capable of at its absolute peak. All athletes dream of the day they can compete on the world's biggest stage. For the marathon runners of 1904, however, I imagine many of them wish they had just simply stayed home. The 1904 Olympics were filled with a few highs, but mostly a staggering number of lows. This is easily one of the strangest stories in sports history, so if you enjoy this content, call your grandma, grab the life alert around her neck, use it as a lasso, and smash that subscribe button. Anyways, let's get right into this video. The 1904 Summer Olympics were held in the great city of St. Louis, the friendliest city you'll ever be shot in. 32 athletes from 7 nations lined up to compete in the marathon. By the end, only 14 of them would finish. Even the winner crossed the finish line half an hour slower than the slowest Olympic marathon time ever recorded. And the deeper we get into this story, the more obvious that outcome becomes. As a quick side note, this marathon marked the first Olympic appearance of both Cuba and South Africa. 2 Swanee men, Mantanuane and Jan Masciani, were in St. Louis at the time as part of the South African exhibit at the 1904 World Fair. From what historians could tell, they were essentially just around, and someone asked if they wanted to run a marathon. Also representing Cuba was Andrés Carvajal. Remember that name because we'll be coming back to him. If you're familiar with modern Olympic marathons or marathons in general, they usually begin early in the morning to avoid extreme heat. James Edward Sullivan, the chief organizer of the games, disagreed. In all of his wisdom, he started the race at 3 in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day. The course began inside of the stadium before spilling out onto the dusty back roads of St. Louis. Officials rode ahead of the runners in vehicles, kicking up massive clouds of dust that went straight into the athletes' lungs. So imagine this. 24 miles, unpaved roads, dust being thrown directly into your face, and temperatures hovering around 90 degrees. And don't worry, it only gets worse. The marathon runner's route wasn't cleared or marked in any meaningful way. Runners had to dodge cars, trains, and stray dogs along the way. Masciani, one of the South African runners, was literally chased off course by a pack of dogs. Many others collapsed from heat exhaustion and dehydration, which brings us to perhaps the most insane part of this entire event. The runners weren't given water. Okay, that's not entirely true. They were given water twice, one at the 6-mile mark and once again at mile 12, over a 24-mile race. The official reasoning? The organizers wanted to study the effects of intentional dehydration. And what did they learn? That people can die. One runner, William Garcia, began coughing up blood mid-race. He was later found unconscious, face down on the road, suffering from severe internal injuries. If a spectator hadn't stumbled upon him, he would have died right there on the course. Despite all of this, 14 runners managed to persevere. The first man to cross the finish line was Frederick Lors. He was greeted with thunderous applause, posed for photos with the president's daughter, received a wreath, and was moments away from being awarded the gold medal until spectators informed officials that they had seen him riding in a car. Lors had dropped out around mile 9 and hitched a ride back to the stadium. Ironically, the car broke down around mile 19, at which point he decided to hop back onto the course and finish the race. Even with a 10-mile car ride, he still finished 13 minutes slower than the previous Olympic marathon. That's how bad these conditions were. When confronted, Lors claimed it was all just a practical joke. He was banned for life, though that was later reduced to a 6-month suspension. Accountability was clearly not a strong theme of the 1904 games. Now let's talk about Andrés Carvajal, the Cuban runner I told you to remember. Carvajal was given money by the Cuban government to travel to the Olympics. He made a pit stop in New Orleans where he promptly gambled away all of his money. With no money, no food, and no transportation, he walked to St. Louis on foot. He arrived just in time for the race, but without proper running clothes, he cut his pants into shorts and lined up at the start. During the marathon, spectators reported Carvajal would stop to chat with them and ask for food. Some accounts even claim he stole peaches from a passing car. At one point, he wandered into an apple orchard and ate so many apples, most of them rotten, that he became violently ill. He laid down for a nap, recovered quickly, and then back in the race and went on to finish in 4th place. Carvajal was selected to represent Cuba again in the next Olympic, once more funded by the Cuban government. This time, he never showed up. He disappeared somewhere in Italy, was presumed dead, and even had an obituary published. Then one day, without explanation, he strolled back into Cuba on a Spanish steamboat. No one knows where he went. Personally, I assume he was gambling. Let it ride, baby. Come on, a true legend. Back to the race itself. The official winner was Thomas Hicks, though winner might be a generous term. Hicks led for the first 10 miles before he began to collapse. His trainers kept him moving by feeding him a mixture of egg whites, brandy, and strychnine. Yes, strychnine. Rat poison. When the first dose wore off, they slapped him with a second. He began hallucinating, and by the end of the race had to be carried across the finish line. Somehow this was allowed. At that point, it was probably the least concerning thing happening. Doctors later determined that one more dose would have killed him. Hicks lost 8 pounds in 3 hours and was immediately taken away on a stretcher. So with what only could be described as gross negligence, if not attempted murder, was James Edward Sullivan ever held accountable? Not really. There was no major consequences, no public reckoning, no meaningful reform tied directly to his decisions that day. In fact, Sullivan would go on to become one of the most influential figures in American track and field, eventually serving as president of the Amateur Athletic Union and chairman of the New York State Athletic Commission. The disaster of the 1904 Olympic Marathon didn't define his career in any meaningful way. It barely even seemed to slow it down. As for the runners, there's little record of widespread outrage. Early Olympic endurance events were brutal by design, and suffering was often treated as proof of legitimacy rather than a problem to be solved. Collapsing, hallucinating, or nearly dying wasn't seen as scandalous. It was simply part of the sport. The 1904 Olympic Marathon stands as a reminder that with enough incompetence, poor planning, and blind faith in bad ideas, you can also turn a celebration of human potential into a cautionary tale and still walk away untouched. And somehow, despite everything, the Olympics survived. This has been the Salty Goose production, and I'll see you in the next one.